Hello again. It's another Wednesday. We'll call them Wellness Wednesdays with the two of us, Michael and Robin, here at Sunraven. And this is a wellness talk. The last couple of weeks, we've introduced subjects about Lyme disease, and the last 2 weeks in particular about COVID. Lifestyle and COVID was last week. And this week, as we were talking to each other, we're aware that people have heard a lot of advice about what to do, what kind of ideas are out there that might make a difference. There's certainly a lot of news reports about medical advice from experts, quote unquote experts, and I think most people who are intelligent take a lot of that in, and they really think about it seriously and considerately. And many times we listen to things that are come across our path, or even our own intuition, and we say, hey, that's a good idea, I should do that. And it requires us to then do something different, perhaps, than what we have already been doing. And let's just say, to use a word that's simple enough to address what we're going to talk about today, which is change. So if you have an idea, a new idea, and it directs you to reconsider how you've been handling something, basically you make an adjustment, and that adjustment requires some sort of change. In the package of possible changes, we can adopt new behaviors, like we can eat, green leafy vegetables if we've never eaten them before. So we can add that to our list, and those all are sort of, we don't always want to do those things. Actually, those are easier to do than the other side of it, which is things that we have been habitually doing that are part and parcel of our daily life and experience, and even our cultural norms. When we think about those and think that maybe some of those need to be adjusted, there's this requirement to let go. And some changes require letting go. And so that's what we really want to talk to you about today, because those, to us, are the things that we find are more challenging for people. And so we want this talk today to be practical in that regard. So Robin, when we talk about when we see our people individually, or we know them collectively, or even ourselves as a couple, our family, we talk about things, what can we do differently. You recognize quite readily, this is one of your insights and intuitional strengths, which is that you can see in people where they're holding on to something that's not serving them. And maybe you talk about that specifically with your clients, but I guess the question is, how do people begin the conversation, their internal conversation, and maybe even a conversation with somebody else, to start identifying what those things are? And I think the next step is to really even understanding what they do with them.
Yeah, good question. I think the first question to ask, that we can ask ourselves, I think it's in our title today, what doesn't serve us, and how we get to that awareness. Okay, so a little clue is if we are upset, if we're angry and frustrated. Other than connection and joy and flow, we know that's your first step to know that, be curious and ask yourself a little question. Wow, underneath that there is a true need. Okay, so we are here to help pose the question to you. What doesn't serve you in your life right now? Now, with COVID and everything, there's a lot of things that don't serve us. So these are good questions to go continue conversation with.
So how does somebody, so you said, and I think it makes some sense, so your own, so let's say, emotional state often gives you an immediate window into when something is going on that's, are you saying not serving you? So if I get frustrated, then that implies that something's not serving me?
Well, underneath, what it implies is that there is a need underneath, and the second step rather is to understand what the reaction is trying to inform you. So our emotions are here to inform us. Most of us were told that if we're angry, that it's not okay to be angry. However, anger is a beautiful example to your whole system to ask the question, wow, what is the need? What am I not getting? The most important part here is that it's an inside job. So we are still looking, even through everything we're going through right now, that we want things to be different. And where we need to, I think, continue conversation is that it is an internal, inside job, and how do we get to the next step, which is we do need support, we do need to be validated. So that's where, help will come in. That's where Michael and I can look and create container for a person. So first step is to be aware what your emotions are trying to inform you. They're good, they're healthy. We didn't all get that information when we were younger, first of all. Does that make sense?
Well, I still have a question. So I think that
Sure.
it's, so when we say something doesn't serve us, so I'm thinking as an example, my repetitive thinking that things are going to go along my schedule is definitely not serving me, because there's the rest of the world out there that doesn't always cooperate with my timeliness. And so it's not serving me to hold on to that really rigorous, tight schedule and the expectations even that for others to serve me. So what's not serving me really is my thought process, which is to hold on to that. So how do I then, and I might get frustrated then, what you're saying is I might get frustrated then if somebody runs late or something doesn't happen when I expect it to. So I'll get frustrated. So that frustration will tell me, okay, something is coming up, it keeps coming up. So I get that part of it. Right. Now what do I do with it? So now I've identified, okay, I've learned that my tightness with time isn't serving me. Right. Okay, so we identified that. Now what would you say is the next important step?
So we can't get to the next step till we understand what's underneath that. So there's an expectation that you have, and it may be historical, it may be a trauma from when we're younger. It may have been an impatient parent or an environment that didn't hold the space for you. Underneath, we want to get to maybe the trauma and what the true need is. So we're not able to go to that next step. We cannot let go of the life preserver if we don't understand what we're letting go of. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so that makes some sense. So then I need to dig a little deeper into how the setup got me into the state where that became my need, and because it was trying to serve me to do something, which is appease maybe some other type of anxiety that I might have, or the lack of nourishment or love, or when was it coming, when I'm hungry, did I get fed on time, whatever it is. Right. So now let me just switch to another example. So let's say in a lot of the work that we do, when we see people with chronic ailments, let's say Lyme disease, going back to that conversation, or when people are talking about COVID right now, and one of the ways we talk about self-care is, how do you nourish yourself? And nourishment comes in the thoughts in your mind and the people in your environment. But very specifically, I just want to use a very concrete, common example, which is the food we consume. So how we nourish ourselves physically in the most obvious material form. People are aware that there are certain behaviors around food that are beneficial, like eating less junk, just using the big category. And I'm not here today to discuss what that might be, but let's say you realize somebody's talking to you, I need to let go of my need to eat junk or my tendency to eat junk, and I'm having a hard time giving that up.
Okay, so we're back to the original question as you asked, you were curious about your own patterns. So there's a lot of attachments and, well, let me use a different word. The physical body remembers everything. So we would want to understand what the desire is, right? I'd like to eat healthier food, and what prevents me from moving towards that goal. Now, my job is where we go down in the basement. I have a lot of dreams about being in the cellar, because I can take people deep down in a gentle, loving way to see, because there are always connection, and the dots can bring us to, perhaps it could have been one little incident, or it could have been something more traumatic, like you can't get up off the table unless you eat everything on your plate, whether the child, usually it's the child, likes this or not. this is where we have the tools and the information that traumas, past traumas and experiences live in our cells on a cellular level. So we want to eat healthy food, or you may want to be more patient and be conscious about your time and how it affects other people and this expectation. However, if we don't get to the core root, we cannot create the change that we need.
Okay, so we get to the core root. We realize that, yes, our mother insisted that we eat peas. They were, terrible tasting. I have a complete aversion to them for the rest of my life. Now it's a good food, these green things. And so, but I can't really bring myself to doing it. So now I understand that I want to eat more green vegetables. I understand that I've had some sort of, I'll just use the word trauma, it's probably not the proper word to use in this case, but some sort of traumatic experience that sort of created my own mindset around the subject of myself, food, my mother, nourishment, love, whatever it is. It got very complicated. How do I help myself to let go of that sort of rule I have in my mind? Many people do. I don't eat green vegetables. I don't eat, I don't need to spend money on organic food. I don't need to cut out how much animal products I eat. I don't need to worry about how much, cakes, cookies, chips, and pasta I eat because the processed foods are okay. Right. They fight back. Right. There's like this resistance, right? And right. So how do we know this? Right. What do we do?
Well, the first thing is also to be educated to know that we as human beings do what is familiar, and it's not always comfortable. It's not even, we can all think of something like, I wasn't going to do that, and there I'm eating the chips, right? So what we need is love, compassion, gentleness to say, wow, the first thing that we do that cuts ourselves off, where we split off, where we cannot create that change, is judgment. So we need to be really gentle.
Oh, that's great.
Through the awareness, gentleness.
So that's really good. So, okay, so, yeah, so I think it's true. If we just somehow got to a point, maybe this is going to be a dot we haven't yet connected to, but we have a vision that, yes, we are lovable, and we deserve love, so we deserve good nourishment. And something did happen that disconnected us from the flow of those things. Maybe we even learned to think inappropriately to some extent, but understandably, that we're not lovable for some period of time. But now we need to get back to that. So what you're suggesting is that in the love of yourself that you deserve is also that patience with yourself and the high regard, that this is not going to necessarily be easy. It's not going to come immediately because you know these things. That's what I was trying to say. Knowing them is not enough. We need to find another way of being. And so you're saying start with love. Start with loving yourself and really appreciating how worthy you are then of all the good things.
Yes, and truly, if you work with a simple there's another process that I will use that I think will help you. So before, during, and after. So if we think about any situation and we ask ourselves, how did it feel before, during, and after? Is a great tool. It's simple. When you're in your emotions, it's really hard to get to, a grounded sort of baseline. However, these questions, being curious about what is really underneath and what is really feeding you. So that's a simple tool. How does this feel before, during, and after?
So then that makes me think of another thing that will often come up that makes it challenging to make these changes and to let go, which is the guilt and shame that comes up with, so when you ask that question before, during, and after. So let's say it's ice cream, tons of ice cream, like a pint of ice cream after dinner, which I hear people jokingly say they do, but I think actually many people do something like that. Or alcohol is common, or other substances, or junk food itself, candy. And before, during, and after, if you apply that rule, before, I'm hungry, I want to be fed, I want to be loved, or I'm stressed, I need some relief, whatever. So that's the before. During, I get real satisfaction when I do any of those things. So it feels great. So I might have the second and third cocktail, or another, sort of spoonful of ice cream, or another candy bar. After, of course, we know what that feels like, which is really pretty down. Either because physically now we've consume something that's really down for us. But then the worst part of it is the mental, this shame and guilt that we know the following morning we wake up, we didn't sleep well, and so we look back at what we did, and the after is pretty poor in terms of the feeling, and then we blame ourselves, we're hard on ourselves, we judge ourselves, and then we feel guilt, and then we have some shame, and so that's hard.
Okay, absolutely. And most of the shame and guilt really came from outside ourselves. It's not our true nature to guilt and shame ourselves. I mean, that could be a broad statement, a big statement. However, back to what you concluded with is love. So if you have these patterns and you end up in that place the next day, is to be gentle and loving, as you would imagine a loving mother or father. Then we can take it, and I infuse spirituality. So it's either our finite selves, which is limited, and that may even be limited with all of our experiences that we had growing up, and no one was perfect. Our parents may have been trying to protect us, and it could come off quite harsh, and it could feel traumatic to us that stops us in our tracks. We can also go to something bigger than ourselves to help us, because when we're in the shame and guilt, those are really difficult emotions to free ourselves with if there isn't compassion and love and forgiveness, truly.
Yeah, so I think that makes sense too. So then your advice, our advice
Suggestion. I give suggestions.
Yeah, well, the idea
Doctors
here is,
give advice when they need to. You take their advice.
well, okay, fair enough. What we'd like to share for consideration is the idea that when you have an idea for some change, and we're talking primarily now today about the letting go stuff, so the stuff that we've done habitually that we know isn't serving us because we have that after effect, that before, during, after, we don't feel good once we have done it. It's the following day, and we realize that didn't really support my growth, my development, my health, my vitality, my relationships, whatever it didn't serve. And it happens repetitively, so we can identify what those things are. Your answer, and I think our first answer then, is to consider how important love is. To consider loving yourself, even when you do that, and you keep doing it. If you can start introducing love and understanding and compassion for yourself, what you're saying is that will soften some of this, will loosen some of the grip. Now, of course, then it continues to require ongoing application, some sort of dedication about a vision of yourself, a goal of what this may look like when you're successful. Even positive affirmations in that regard can be also, I think, complementary.
Right.
But the idea then is to start with the love. We all know, for the most part, that when we have habits, that we do them repetitively, sort of mindlessly, and then we have these after effects, which gets us to rethink. So to recap a little bit, when we started the conversation, it was, how do you know when something's not serving you? And then, Robin, your answer was, emotions keep popping up.
Can I just add, I know you're going to continue with the review. I think it's really, really important. When we are stuck in our emotions, we really cannot use our cognitive part of our brain to actually think about another choice.
Right.
It overtakes us. Right?
So I think what you would, I think, also agree with, though correct me if I'm wrong, is that we often rely too heavily on our intellect. So our cognitive. So yes, our cognitive is bypassed when we're in the emotional state.
Right.
But there is another alternative, or at least a complementary way of moving forward, which is from the heart. So, we rely very heavily on our plans, our ideas, our thoughts, and all this information that we sort of accumulate over time. However, there's this heartfelt sense of our belonging and our loving nature, meaning to receive as well as to give. And that can guide us too. And very often when we are confused, cognitively, there's two people we respect giving us different pieces of information that seem contradictory. And we're emotional, because that's frustrating or because we just have other things going on in our life. There's this other thing, which is getting back in touch with your deeper sense of understanding, of feeling, your birthright to some extent, to have a good life and to have a meaningful, purposeful life. And that even though you're not flowing at the moment, there's a lot of fits and starts in this process, that doesn't change what you deserve or what you heartfully feel is in your future. And sometimes going back into the heart is a way, and that's of course where the love would be too. It would be where you can find some solace, because sometimes, as I find it, when people try really hard, they work it, they get tired, and they need an infusion of something that's positive energy and vitality, and a lot of that has to be also internal. It can't be just compliments from other people. So you need to have true, deep self-satisfaction. And sometimes you have to look into your own heart and then connect that heart to the spiritual overriding consciousness of your truer identity, the higher you that oversees and overlooks everything, and is watching this body and this body-mind in its own sort of ruts, and our higher power, essentially, our higher mind, is our best friend and our greatest advocate, and it's just helping us. So if we can connect our heart to that, I think we find another way of accomplishing some of these things.
Yes, and that also takes support and having a different experience. And so it takes the courage and the willingness to look inside ourselves when we feel that we are not feeling connected and to the place of love. That's our first, and I say this, I could say this now because I'm on this other side, which is ongoing. However, I understand in the conflict, in the upset, the jewel is right underneath there. So we weren't taught that. Like, there's something really beautiful trying to happen underneath. And I think that's really, really important to share with all of you today. The love, well, how do I love myself if I automatically go into shaming and blaming? Right. And that's another one, resentments. We have resentments that we hold against ourselves for years, that we're imperfect or that we didn't live up to the expectations of what the world, our parents, needed us to be, wanted us to be. I'm going to make the correction. So now we get to have choice now. We have the freedoms now, and the understanding and the support and the wisdom and knowledge that we do need to feel connected to a tribe. And that's the very place where we go into shame, or we will split ourselves off, because from a primitive place, it's energetically in our bodies, like animals, they may feel like they're going to be annihilated. So it's very primitive. However, if we go underneath all of those deep emotions, it's really wanting to survive and thrive and be seen and acknowledged. Yeah. And that might be another topic for next week, about how important it is to really have community around all of us. So it's an inside job, and that is actually, I would like this in my life. Set the intention for yourself. You don't have to figure it out all on your own, because our behaviors, we will do what's familiar, even if it causes us pain, until we have some practice and support, and we actually get to, slowly get to another place of what we want to work towards, what's comfortable, right?
And as you were speaking too, I was thinking how caught up, I can speak from my own experience, but I think I can also share this because it's conversations I've had with many people who feel often the case, is that we're taught to believe sometimes that we need to do all sorts of things to get there. Not just one thing, but it's a string of correct moves to get to the desired outcome. So that we need to, deal with stress and meditate and have all these good relationships and eat perfectly well and exercise and get outside and also have lucky genetics and all sorts of other things, and that we don't stand a chance if we're not doing those things particularly well, and that we really sort of sort of have an expectation set for ourselves that you need to do things so well across the board. And our experiences, and part of even slow medicine and the Wheel of Health that we've described in our work, which has 7 major areas, community being one,
Right behind us.
is that what you just, what we feel is important to do is just to touch on them, is to keep trying. There's no need to be perfect. What's truly remarkable is every little bit of improvement makes a big difference to the whole. So if your relationships with one person is just a little bit better today, if you do wind up getting outside tomorrow, if you start thinking about going to farmers markets and buying some more of the vegetables, and you just do these over time, every one of those positive mind actions adds up and is synergistic.
Resets,
And you don't need to be perfect. You don't need to do it all. And therefore, the guilt and the shame and the frustration of occasionally, maybe frequently doing things the old way doesn't have to feel so terrible to you. As long as you can do more of the things, even just starting with the thought process of embracing some of the things we're talking about today, which is to identify those things that are important for you to recognize as not serving, then maybe speaking to somebody like Robin to help explore maybe the root of where they come from, how to apply love to the process, how to work within your heart, use the cognitive knowledge and information that you've been given and that appeals to you, work on your plan and keep going in that path. And as you continue to do things that are habitual, as they teach in the typical meditation course, when you find your concentration drifting, kindly, gently bring it back. You know where to go. You say, oh, I was doing that again. And without necessarily going more into it, getting more harmful to yourself, recognizing it more quickly and more adeptly, you then can come back to, nope, here's the plan. I will try it again tomorrow. And I love myself. I see myself getting there, and that's going to feel good to me.
Yeah.
That's what I would
That's
say.
beautiful. And progress is perfection. Many of us were raised in a very different world of no, you have to. It was what everything looked like on the outside, and there was a lot of evaluation. So if we do observation in place of evaluation, it's going to soften right in your heart. That would be really the most important thing you can identify. Am I judging myself right now, or am I observing? Oh, there I was doing that thing that it doesn't feel so good before, during, and after, to tie it all together. So I hope we gave you some tools and food for thought today. And it always comes back to love. Love is unconditional, and when we feel loved as human beings, we can thrive. A plant will thrive in the garden when it has all the nutrients, and this is a many overlooked nutrient, and that's love. And we can all choose to love ourselves today.
That's great.
Yeah.
I love the phrase "progress is perfection." That's what's required, not perfection itself, but just to keep on it and to let us know what we can do to offer our support for you. Obviously, call us here at Sunraven. You can go onto our website, slowmedicine.org, and learn more about what we do. And we are just more than happy to be involved in anyone's life who feels they need the support that we can offer. And there's a great community here. And maybe that's what we will talk about next week. So if you have other thoughts about what we might want to talk about on our wellness talks, please send us a note. You can send a note to info@slowmedicine.org. And most of you have access to our numbers and our emails, and don't hesitate. We will get back to you.
And sharing, before we close, how we keep that love is then giving away. So you can share with your friends that we're on today and give them hope and give them support. And that could be a very loving thing that you can do, that you can receive and also share with others.
Yeah, so if you like this, we will download it to our newsletters that we send out. And if you have a hard time finding it, just let us know. So hope you have a great week.
Yes, beautiful. To all of you, we look forward to seeing you next week, hearing from you. I can't see without my glasses, but thank you for all who love themselves today and tuned in with us.
Yeah, all right. And be well, stay well, keep working on it. Progress is all you need.
Progress is perfection.
Bye-bye.